Music star Charley Pride died today following complications from COVID-19.
In a world where skin color once slammed doors shut, there was a man who stepped forward, not with noise, not with protest, but with a song. And when he sang, those doors opened. Charley Pride, a name known to millions of hearts, not just for his music, but for what he stood for. He was the man who dared to cross the color line in a genre that had long accepted only white faces. He wasn't from Nashville. He didn't come from a family of musicians. He came from the cotton fields of Mississippi, from a world where dreams often faded beneath the weight of reality. But Charley didn't step back. He didn't knock. He sang. And that voice became the key that unlocked the gates of one of the most conservative industries in America. On stage, he was a symbol. Under the spotlight, he was a sought-after artist, wealthy, living a life most people only dream of. But behind the curtain, there was a shadow no one could quite reach, a forgotten house where guitars once sang and now sat silent, like the tomb of an era. And today, we step into that house, not just to remember Charley Pride's life, but to understand why the legacy he left behind endures far longer than any chart-topping hit. With an estimated net worth of $40 million at the time of his death, Charley didn't just achieve success, he redefined it. As the first black artist to find major success in country music, he didn't just pave the way, he shattered the ceiling. Over the course of his career, he became the second best-selling artist in RCA's history, behind only Elvis Presley. In 1971, he was named Entertainer of the Year by the Country Music Association, a milestone not just for him, but for the nation. Hits like Just Between You and Me, Kiss an Angel Good Morning, I'm Just Me weren't merely songs, they were monuments of a time when Charley Pride turned music into a bridge connecting worlds that were never meant to meet. But few know that before becoming a pioneer in country music, he was a baseball player, competing in the Negro Leagues, back when opportunities for black athletes in major leagues were nearly non-existent. He later became a minority owner of the Texas Rangers. To him, music and sports weren't opposites, they were twin rivers, flowing through the same spirit of resilience. Charley Pride was born on March 18, 1934, in Sledge, Mississippi, the fourth of 11 children in a poor sharecropping family. His childhood was rooted in soil, sweat, and the kind of discrimination and injustice no child should ever endure. But inside young Charley, two things grew steadily, a dream of music, and a pair of baseball gloves. His mother, a woman who couldn't sing, gave him his first guitar when he turned 14. It wasn't an expensive gift. But it was the gift that awakened another destiny. Charley began strumming, singing, dreaming, but he didn't give up on baseball. Baseball was his first dream, one that smelled of red dirt, rang with the crack of the bat, and offered a sense of escape from a fate already written. But sometimes, destiny doesn't arrive through grand victories, it finds its way through quiet detours. In 1952, at the age of 18, Pride put on the jersey of the Memphis Red Sox, a team in the Negro American League, where black talent was forced to play a part because they weren't yet welcome in the major leagues. It was a dream starting to come true. He moved constantly, playing for teams like the Boise Yankees, Louisville Clippers, Birmingham Black Barons, a warrior endlessly chasing the biggest game of his life. But on those nights in temporary housing, when the field emptied and the lights shut off, something inside him never fell silent: music. In 1956, he was drafted into the Army. Stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, he kept playing baseball, but he also began to sing more seriously, performing for fellow soldiers, for local communities, and for himself. It was no longer just a pastime. It was a calling. After being discharged in 1958, he returned to the Memphis Red Sox, one more try. But soon, the name Charley Pride began to echo not in stadiums, but on stages. In Helena, Montana, a place seemingly far from the map of American music, he played semi-pro baseball for the East Helena Smelterites by day and quietly stepped onto small bar stages by night. Then one night, his voice reached the ears of someone special, Chet Atkins, the legendary RCA producer. It was Atkins who signed Charley to his first record deal, opening the door music had only gently knocked on before. In 1966, the single The Snakes Crawl at Night was released, but fell into silence. No charts. No audience. No applause. But he didn't give up. The third single, Just Between You and Me, released in 1967, changed everything. The song became a commercial breakthrough, paving the way for his first major performance at Detroit's Olympia Stadium. More importantly, it took him to the legendary Grand Ole Opry stage. Charley Pride entered history as the first black artist to perform at the Grand Ole Opry since DeFord Bailey in 1941. A stage once reserved for a single skin color, now opened, not because of protest, but because of a voice that could not be denied. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, Pride released a string of hits like All I Have to Offer You Is Me, I Can't Believe That You've Stopped Loving Me, I'd Rather Love You. Each song was a piece of his life, gentle, steadfast, and marked by someone who had known pain, but never lost faith. Then in 1971, Charley Pride released Kiss an Angel Good Morning. And from that moment, he was no longer a phenomenon. He was history. The song not only topped the country charts, it propelled him beyond the black community, into the hearts of all Americans, across color, age, and belief. That same year, he lent his voice to All His Children, the theme for Sometimes a Great Notion, a song later nominated for an Oscar. A black artist, once denied stages because of his skin, now stood alongside Hollywood's biggest names. The 1970s and 1980s marked the peak of Charley Pride's career. Hits like Mississippi Cotton Picking Delta Town, Burgers and Fries, and I Don't Think She's in Love Anymore further cemented his place as a living monument. But his music wasn't just loved in America. In 1975, he performed in the UK, where his song Crystal Chandeliers became an unofficial anthem for both sides of the Northern Ireland conflict. A country song, born in America, became a symbol of unity in a deeply divided land. That's the kind of power only real music can carry. And then, he returned to baseball, not on the field, but in the honored stands. In 1980, he sang the national anthem at the World Series, the most watched edition in history. 30 years later, in 2010, he returned once more, as if to close the perfect circle between the two dreams that had always lived inside him. In 2016, Charley Pride appeared in the video Forever Country, a collaborative tribute marking 50 years of country music. Even at over 80 years old, he stood there, steady, calm, as an inseparable part of the genre's history. In 2017, he released the album Music in My Heart, his first in 6 years. Not to prove anything, but simply to sing, because the music in his heart had never stopped. Charitable work. If music had carried him out of the poor fields of Mississippi, then charity was the way he returned, to give back what he once lacked. And he didn't give through money alone. He gave through memory, through empathy, and through a life built on the knowledge that he was once a child with nothing but hope. Charley Pride founded the Charley Pride Foundation, not as a celebrity obligation, but as a personal promise. He had lived in Sledge, a small town where poverty wasn't just a condition, but a fate. He understood what it meant to grow up without books, without a path to school, without someone to teach you how to dream big, and how many untold talents had died in silence because of it. That's why the Foundation's first mission was education for rural youth, children like he once was. Scholarships were awarded. Programs were funded. Quietly. Without spotlight. But little dreams, one by one, were kept alive. He believed that education was the only door that could open a future for a child with nothing but faith. And if music had lifted him up, then it could become the wings for others too. So Pride didn't stop at textbooks. He extended his reach into music and arts education. He knew, sometimes a single guitar, a classroom with instruments, or a few words of encouragement at the right moment, could change the course of a life. Schools were given instruments. Art classes were launched. And students were given the right to try, to fail, and to become someone, even in places where no one had ever been allowed to. But he didn't just think about the future. He thought about those who had given up their past. As a veteran of the U.S. Army, Charley Pride knew the loneliness that lingers after war. He never forgot those who returned with invisible wounds, those who had put aside their own dreams to protect this country. He performed in fundraising concerts for veterans. He joined musical events supporting their healthcare, calling for better living conditions, because he knew they deserved to be heard as the silent heroes they were. He once said, "Some songs aren't heard from a stage, they come from gratitude." And that's why he didn't sing just for himself. He sang for those who no longer could. Throughout his career, he participated in dozens of charity concerts, each time quietly donating, sharing, and inspiring. From disaster relief to supporting minority communities, from helping underprivileged students to under-resourced hospitals, he was there. Not to talk about himself, but to help others be remembered. He didn't preach. He didn't do politics. He simply lived through kindness. And in the end, what people remember about Charley Pride is not just the awards, the charts, or the legendary hits. It's that he lived. And when he succeeded, he didn't go alone. Personal life. His personal life, like that of many great artists, was a tapestry woven from both silence and noise. But at the center of it all was one woman, Rosine, who walked beside him through the decades, not as a spectator, but as his life partner. They met in Memphis, Tennessee, not on a stage, but when Charley was still a young baseball player. Their relationship began simply, quietly, without fanfare. During a Christmas leave in 1956, while he was in military training, he returned to Memphis. And there, love took root, not in haste, not in a whirlwind, but slowly and steadily, like a melody that quietly underscored a lasting life. They married. And then they lived, quietly, through many stormy years. Together, they raised 3 children, Craig, Dion, and Angela. These children grew up not under stage lights, but in the protective arms of a father who, though often on tour, was never truly absent. That family eventually expanded, with grandchildren, and later great-grandchildren. Each generation a new branch growing from the same deep roots planted in Sledge so long ago. But like every real family, not everything was perfect. In the late 1970s, at the height of his fame, Charley Pride had a brief relationship with an unmarried flight attendant in Dallas. From that relationship, Tyler, a son, was born in 1979. For a long time, Tyler's existence went unacknowledged. And that silence, eventually had to meet the light. In 1990, the mother filed a paternity suit, demanding legal recognition and child support. Pride initially denied the claim. The story quickly captured media attention, a blemish on a public image long associated with kindness and integrity. But truth, however delayed, has a way of surfacing. In 1992, DNA testing confirmed that Charley was indeed Tyler's biological father. The Texas court ordered him to provide financial support until Tyler turned 18. But more importantly, Tyler was given the Pride name, officially becoming part of the family. A difficult chapter closed not with conflict, but with acknowledgement, late, but necessary. Charley Pride never claimed to be perfect. And perhaps he never tried to be. He simply tried to do what was right, even when it meant facing the past, and paying the price in time and courage. The estate in Dallas, Texas. After years of traveling across America, through stage lights, applause, and countless lonely nights in unfamiliar hotel rooms, Charley Pride finally found a place to rest. Not a 5-star hotel. Not a sleek, modern penthouse. But an old-world estate in Dallas, what he and his wife, Rosine, called our private heaven. Tucked quietly in the heart of Texas, the 6,200-square-foot villa was a French Norman-style masterpiece, with steep roofs, classic lines, and an elegance that felt lifted from the pages of a mid-century French novel. When the gates opened, the house emerged like a living painting, a graceful pause in a life once filled with relentless motion. Outside, it was built of natural stone. Inside, it pulsed with artistic detail. Designed by legendary architect Charles Dilbeck, the home didn't boast wealth, it whispered refinement. Soaring vaulted ceilings revealed exposed wooden beams, like ribs guarding the soul of the house. Antique fireplaces dotted many corners, not merely to warm the air, but to keep the fire of memory alive. And the light, no dazzling chandeliers, but stained glass windows casting soft hues onto the floor like melodies slipping through sheer curtains. This space was more than architecture. It was a symphony of stone, wood, and light, a place where every wall seemed to hold a secret, and every window had once heard his morning song. Step outside, and the 1.6-acre ground seemed to stretch time itself. The trees whispered in the breeze, and the garden bloomed like a musical score written in leaves. Nestled among the greenery, a koi pond shimmered, still, gentle, as if to balance a life once filled with unrest. A modest outdoor cabana, quaint like a chapel, was where the family gathered on cool evenings, or where Charlie sat alone, watching smoke curl from the chimney, thinking about things he never put into words. And because baseball never truly left him, a private baseball field sat behind the house, not for competition, but for tossing balls with his grandchildren, preserving those final throws amid the sound of familiar laughter. Nearby, the pool lay still beneath the Texas sun, not like a resort, but like a soft invitation to return. The fire pit, the stone patio, the barbecue area, none of it was built to impress, but to hold on. As if the house were quietly saying, the most beautiful life is when you can hear the voice of someone you love, beneath the sky. Even the 3-car garage carried a piece of soul. Above it, a separate 1,200 square foot space had been transformed into an office, a studio, or a guest retreat. Perhaps, on some night, he sat there alone, guitar in hand, capturing his final melodies in quiet solitude. This house was never meant to be a monument to fame. It was a reward. A place where Charley Pride could return as a husband, a father, a man, not a symbol of musical revolution, not a bearer of history. Just himself. And that was enough. The abandoned house in Mississippi. In the heart of Mississippi, where Charley Pride was born, where he grew up, and what he carried in his heart no matter how far he roamed, there stands a house few have ever heard of. It wasn't grand like the Dallas estate. It never made headlines. But to Charley, it held a meaning nothing else could replace, a promise to return home, a vow to himself, that after all the years standing before thousands, he would end his journey on the very soil that raised him with sweat and quiet endurance. He didn't buy the house as an investment. He bought it to restore, brick by brick, frame by frame, preparing for the day he'd come home. A quiet but deeply heartfelt renovation project began, shaped in mid-century modern design, blending the comfort of the present with the softness and nostalgia of memory. Every room, every corner was reimagined to suit the vision of an ideal retirement, peaceful, warm, and familiar enough to feel like a return to himself. But then COVID-19 struck. And that homecoming would never happen. Charley Pride passed away in December 2020, just months before he had planned to move in. Since then, the house has remained silent. No one lives there. No more singing. No breakfasts on the porch, no late afternoons with a warm cup of tea. Only the unfinished marks on the walls remain, like a melody left incomplete, ending in a wordless pause. The house was put up for sale. But no one has moved in. It feels less like a property awaiting a new owner, and more like a home still waiting for the one who never made it back. Set on nearly an acre of land, its open mid-century layout creates a seamless flow of light and air, a natural rhythm through space. The master bedroom, spacious and serene, was once envisioned as the final resting place. Now it is simply a quiet room with windows gazing out over the rolling hills. Perhaps he had pictured himself there each morning, leaning back in a chair, coffee in hand, looking toward the horizon, where hazy forest lines trace the edge of the sky like forgotten memories. Just outside the porch, the pool sparkles, not large, not lavish, but just enough to ripple with soft sounds, like the gentle heartbeat of peaceful days. The outdoor area was designed for hosting friends and family, for warm afternoons, quiet winter nights around the fire, long conversations with no need for endings. But all of that is now only imagined. The garden is still green. The porch still wide. The Mississippi sky, still beautiful. But the man who dreamed it all, is gone. Passing. The final years of Charley Pride's life weren't merely a closing act. They were a series of low, somber notes, quiet, resilient, and marked by more than a few scars. In 1997, he was diagnosed with a tumor on his vocal cords, the very place from which so many unforgettable hits had once risen. For anyone else, it would have been a cause for concern. But for Charley Pride, a man whose life depended on his voice, it was the shadow of the end. Thankfully, doctors at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences performed a successful surgery. The voice was saved. But from that point on, he knew, time was no longer abundant. He began to slow down. Spent more time with his family. His name still appeared on posters. But inside, he had already stepped back. Like a stage light fading just enough to let real life come through. Then in December 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic swept across the United States, Charley Pride passed away in Dallas, at the age of 86. No fanfare. No farewell tour. Just a quiet announcement, and a deep emptiness that spread through Nashville. An era in country music had come to a close. A voice that once bent the lines of race, now fell silent. And yet, his death, like the final spotlight on a darkened stage, cast a glow on parts of the story never told. In May 2021, Charley Pride, the son born from an extramarital relationship, filed a lawsuit, challenging the legality of the will. He claimed he had been deliberately excluded, not due to legal grounds, but to preserve the public image of a country music legend. Rosine Pride, his widow, did not deny the bloodline. She acknowledged, Tyler was Charley's biological son. But she also stated, Tyler has been supported. He has been acknowledged. He has been fairly compensated. She called the lawsuit a financial tactic. And the conflict, once private, became public. By September 2022, the case was settled. The terms undisclosed. And like every family tragedy, no one truly won. Only silence remained, like a quiet note after a crescendo. The story ended, not with reconciliation, nor with judgment, but with stillness. Yet even as disputes, wills, and headlines circled his name, there was one thing no one could deny. Charley Pride changed country music forever. He wasn't perfect. But he was real. He made mistakes. He made amends. He once stood alone, then led a generation across racial lines with the power of a voice. He didn't just use music to live. He used it to heal. To build. To connect. And even though the house in Mississippi still stands abandoned. Even though the Grand Ole Opry stage is silent after his final curtain. Even though legal battles remain a lingering ellipsis after his life. The music he left behind still lives. On the radio. In memory. In the hearts of children who grew up with that warm, steady voice, children, like him, who once believed dreams weren't meant for them. And Charley Pride proved otherwise. If you found Charley Pride's journey unforgettable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this only live on when people like you listen, and tell them again. Thank you for joining us on this journey. See you next time, in another story, another life, and another song.